And I'm live with his Jeffness to review the episode and the title. And now the title, I give the title 0 out of 10. What do you give the title, Jeff?
Well, first, I can't see your title, so I don't know what you titled.
Oh, no, not my own title. My own title's, higher than that. But what is it? Baby, It's You?
Yeah, but I was just curious what you titled it anyway, since your titles are, pretty famous for being really long,
Well, yesterday, we got a little bit of a turn up for the blue. Somebody complimented me on my titles. Kathleen Farber said it was good because people could find, because I crammed all the information in.
Uh-huh. So I was just curious whether this one was like Homicide crossover #2, Law and Order season 8, episode 6, coinciding with Homicide season 6, episode.
Well, you know what? That is not far off. It is. I think it's something like HLOTS crossover : Law and Order, full stop. S08 E06 i.e. Baby It's You review, something like that.
All right, so because Ben couldn't handle two episodes in 1 week this time, we're doing just the Law and Order episode of Baby It's You, which aired originally November 12th, 1997, and was written by Jorge Zamacona and directed by Ed Sheeran. Now, if those names sound familiar to Homicide viewers, then it's because Jorge Zamacona has written other Homicide scripts, and Ed Sheeran has directed both Law and Order and Homicide episodes. So, once again, like they did with the last crossover, they used a director who directs both shows. So,
the actor that plays Munch? Was his writing hand injured? I mean, could not have rewritten his lines to make them a little bit, wittier. But I'll let you get on.
I have no idea, but this will be a deal where I'm reading only part of David B. 226 Morris's article because he writes, both parts all in one thing since there's only one actual Homicide episode involved. So I'll just be reading the first part and stopping. So he says, considering the ratings that the first Law and Order Homicide crossover generated, they were among the best ratings in either show's history. It seems only natural that NBC wanted a sequel. The fact that the producers of both shows, Tom Fontana and Dick Wolf, waited so long explains how many obstacles there were in filming the first one. Indeed, things could have gotten even more complicated, considering that both producers considered including ER in the mix. It's a good thing that show declined. Filming in 2 different cities is hard enough. Adding Hollywood would have probably made things all but impossible. A critical decision was reached when Wolf managed to agree that the story be a 2-part tale told across both shows, rather than 2 separate, self-contained stories. In other words, to understand the whole story, viewers had to watch both shows. This led to syndication problems that would not be resolved until 2004, when TNT aired both shows on its network. Far different animal than the previous crossover. Unlike the previous story, it continued a practice of Law and Order adapting stories from the news headlines, in this case the murder of Jean-Benet Ramsey. The show begins with a suspicious death of Brittany Janaway, a 14-year-old supermodel. It appears as if Brittany has died from toxic shock brought on by what appears to be a vicious sexual assault. Lenny Briscoe and Ray Curtis try to investigate the death while under a huge amount of media attention brought on by the death and the parents of the deceased. From the beginning, the investigation is compromised by a series of leaks to the press, amplified by the suspicious behavior of the Janaways themselves. They and their attorney, Leslie Drake, memorably played by the master of disreputable characters Dan Hedaya, do everything in their power to turn attention away from them, including the offer of a $250,000 reward for information and the private hiring of a criminal profiler. All of this seems to be a way of keeping the attention off of them, which only adds to their suspicion. Eventually, the trail leads to Baltimore, another city the Janaways call home. This time, instead of trying to bypass the PD, Briscoe calls Munch and asks him for assistance tracking a lead. Munch isn't wild about helping the cop who slept with his ex, but he is a lot more congenial than the single-minded Pimbleton. He and Falzone investigate and learn that Brittany may have been raped in Baltimore and that the suspect, the son of a former babysitter, was there that day. Showing an asperity we don't normally associate with him, Ed Danvers sends the detectives to New York to interrogate him and, if necessary, extradite him. This time around, the atmosphere is a lot more comfortable than it was in Charm City, as Munch and Falzone are on their best behavior. The mystery increases when the suspect says that he followed her to the Janeway house in Baltimore and saw her being raped by someone else, he doesn't know who, but that her parents' car was in the driveway. And the rest of this is about the homicide part, so that's the end of that. And I'll just say that the one thing that happens at the end of the Law and Order episodes is that McCoy is talking with a psychiatrist who gives him sort of tips about what fathers who are molesting their children, their mindset, I guess you could say, and it warns him that he's going into a dark place, basically. So that's how that part ends. So, Ben, your thoughts?
It was when it got to that scene, it sort of like keyed things up that maybe in the second part we might have somebody who is a worthy. I won't put that. I'll choose a different word. Somebody, an intelligent opponent who will be hard to. So it's sort of like setting the frame for the next episode that it's going to be hard to nail this guy. So it promises a lot in the way the way it's keyed up in the final scene. All in all, it is rather disappointing in that it's about a 5 out of 10. The dialogue doesn't. The one-liners don't hit the mark. I think the one-liners were a little bit more on the mark in Charm City, I think it was, or the other ones with the Briscoe character. There was. It was fairly interesting, but it seems to go a sort of like a sort of pedestrian investigation. Some interesting a theme came up was they were talking about these very young models. And the theme of the show was models that don't look the real age.
Uh-huh.
And before I go into that, there was actually a bit from there was a scene about Falzone and Munch talking about transsexuals that might not make it these days into a show. Because they might get complaints on Twitter. What we're going to go back to now? Oh yes, going back to and they were talking about, and they had a scene with so the camera starts on a model and shoots her in a certain way, and then says that she is in the 8th grade. So Jeff, do I just add 5 to that to get the age?
And 5 to that to get, yeah, I guess.
Right, okay.
Probably, I mean.
Now, how old do you actually think the actress was?
For me, it's easy
the real
because my birthday's in the summer, so all of my school years, I was always the same age the whole year. But because they're usually like August or September to May or June, then some people obviously have their birthday in there somewhere, so they're not the same age at the end of the year. So she could have been 14 already.
But
great.
But is it fair to say that nearly everyone who's in the 5th grade will be around that age? There's a high likelihood.
In the 8th grade, yeah.
At 13.
Yeah, it would mostly be 13, 14-year-olds in 8th grade, yeah.
Right. So, how old do you think the actual actress was? I may have a picture.
I don't know. You know, I'm not really good at guessing the ages of people by looking at them. And when you're talking about shows where there's a lot of makeup and everything involved, then there can be a lot of, you know, most of the time actors are older than the characters they're playing. So in this case, you know, it's a plot convenience because the whole point is that they're supposed to look older than that. So they could use somebody who was 20 even, and you know, that would be part of the whole point, that they look younger than they are. So it's convenient that way, but I wouldn't even, you know, guess.
Yeah. Where is she? She turns up back. Here she is.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that this was, I watched a low grade video recording because it was, not only was it like low definition, but it was also looked like a VHS copy.
And see, I had the opposite for this because normally I'm watching the Law and Order episodes in lower quality stuff because I'm just doing it off of website stuff. But in this case, because I got the full series Homicide DVD set, it includes a bonus disc that has all 3 of the Law and Order crossover episodes. So I watched it DVD quality.
Right, gotcha. Yes, and Jeff has shown me his DVD set, and very nice it is too. In the form of a miniature filing cabinet.
And cost me less than $100 for the entire series.
Wow. Right, so
but yeah, if I, you know, obviously it's hard for me to guess on ages, especially when they're trying to go for a certain thing. But obviously, when she takes some of her makeup off in her trailer or whatever, she does look younger than she started out at the beginning. You know? So I could, you know, I could see her being 13 or 14. She could be that, even though she does look older. And she talks older than that. But again, that may be part of the point too, is that they're forced into sort of this more grown-up world in the modeling, so that they kind of talk older also.
Oh yeah, and plus you get people just naturally. You get people who talk older, and then you get people who are like 22 who sound like the 14.
Right. So it's kind of an interesting contrast because the one obnoxious guy that they had at the beginning, LaFournette or whatever his name was, I can't remember now, Dan something, I think.
Yeah, the short guy.
Yeah, he says, you know, he basically says they're all stupid, that they have nothing in their heads, but at the same time, they're in this position where in some ways they have to adapt to more adult life, so it's like they're streetwise in a way, whether or not they're like intellectually mature. So it's kind of this combination of both sides of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I've got mixed feelings about this because I know somebody who went from Australia to be a model in France, an ESFJ, and so she, and at 14. So leaving Australia to go to France, but she was like very mature for her age, ESFJ, very, very mature person.
The other funny thing is, after we talked about last week how you know, a character can be so obnoxious for you that you have a hard time enjoying the episode, I immediately thought of that when this guy showed up at the beginning, because I was like, this guy's actually much bigger jerk than our subway victim last week.
Yeah, but this was almost like comedically jerky. Like you can't almost believe it. It's like, I think some people are almost like that with Trump, where it's like, this is like, it's almost as if they can't believe how jerky he is. It's like it's not real, like it's funny to them, and then it goes, wait a minute, this is real. So
yeah.
So I think on TV, if someone's like really, really jerky, it then sort of like crosses over into like spoof and caricature, and so maybe have that like a different. But I do think if he'd have been on, like if they'd have been talking to him a lot longer, and it would have like the attitude would have piled up.
Yeah,
like that, because you know what I mean. If it was like him caught in the subway, we got him. Well,
then even Pimbleton would have been like, "Just let him die. I'm out of here."
Right. So, but I'm interested in the fact that the way the director would have shot that actress, who's 13 years old. Well, I think I think I know why the director's done it. Is the director? So does the director want the male audience, to look after a woman who's ostensibly underage, and then reveal that she's about 13 years old?
I mean, I think, like I said, that's kind of part of the point, is that they're trying to stress that this is that in a way some of the audience is probably complicit in this particular enterprise.
But if the director's done that deliberately on purpose, what do you think of the director deliberately doing that?
What do I think of it?
Yeah. I mean, would you do that? Like play a trick on the audience?
Maybe. Oh, sure. I mean, in general, yes, for sure. Now, whether I do that specific thing, I don't know. But it would depend on what I was really trying to go for with the story. But I think, honestly, that they do a good job. One of the things I like about Law and Order is that they usually do a good job of presenting different perspectives, which, as you know, is something that I like when it's not everything is completely one-sided.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they sort of cover the angles of different people's perceptions of the same thing. And what you have in this, you could accuse them of being a little heavy-handed with that message, but at the same time, there's sort of this underlying theme of the people involved with it being like, well, this is just how it is. It's not going to change. So it's not like the show is trying to do some kind of campaign against teen modeling. I don't get that impression from it at all. It's more of a, we're kind of trying to show you the raw reality of this, so you fully understand the world that they're talking about here.
Plus, it's also a little bit of a double trick on us, because really the actress is probably over 18, if only because once someone's 18 and over, it's a lot easier to because there's not all these regulations about how much.
Right. True.
Because they have to have so much schooling when they're under 18, when they're on set.
Yeah. Now, for a part like that, obviously, where she's only in like one scene, really, you're not going to have a whole lot involved. So, it's probably not that difficult to have an actress that's under 18. But yeah, it's probably more convenient if they did have somebody that in an irony, is old enough to be convenient, but young looking enough to pass as somebody much younger who's trying to look older.
Yes. Yep, there you go. But you can have people like that, yeah.
As to what you said earlier about Munch, I would say that, yeah, we didn't get full-on Munch in this, that's for sure. But again, like I think I might have said when we did the Charm City review, is that they may have kind of done that intentionally, dialed Munch back a little bit because they didn't want him to sort of take over and the Law and Order audience to be like, who's this guy like that we're forced to listen to for all this time.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's like there's two. I once read in a comedy book, a how to write comedy book, which sounds like it's going to be awful, but they made two distinctions between saying funny things and saying things funny. And saying things funny is better than saying funny things. And it might be the case that a lot of the times with Munch, it's him saying funny things. So it's like he has to digress onto a topic and in order to be funny. Whereas there are those people, there's a certain attitude that they have, and it's the way they say it, the sort of like the point of view that it comes from, that is funny. And
yeah, and it takes a little bit of time sometimes for those to develop, and I think
it's very hard.
Belzer's humor, he's not really a one-liner comedian. You have to put a little bit more into it than that. So,
I see what you mean.
And what may have happened, I don't know this for a fact, but Mr. Morris mentioned that the Baltimore cops are kind of more subdued than compared to how Pendleton and Bayless were when they went in the earlier crossover. And there may have been audience response that said, they thought the Baltimore people came on too strong or something, and they may have tried to dial that back intentionally and have them not be as because the attitude is we're trying to build the audience for the other show, but we still want to keep our main audience and not alienate them with this. And so, as we get to the homicide part of it, you may see sort of the opposite, where they don't, that the Law and Order cops are not going to be quite as, front and center.
And I remember last time with is it Briscoe? With Briscoe, that I saw him as a one-liner machine. It's almost as if it's really hard, folks, to strike that balance where you want characters who are witty, who are funny, but sound real, but don't sound like one-liner machines. Whereas I think in this episode, maybe he sounded more real, and in like the other one we did, where he was more of a one-liner machine, where sort of like if you looked at like the individual one-liners, it was like, oh, he's funnier there, but it didn't. But that's like just a personal preference thing, where it's like, does it fit? And also, so it's just a case of where you really want the humor to naturally come out of the character, to really be character based, and it was okay. It's just that I'm not knocking marks off for the dialogue. In fact, it's tricky with dialogue with people when because Jeff and I both know when writers are trying too hard. And right, what else was there? So that thing was. So they had the slight twist where we realised, hey, this is a two-parter, so it can't just be the guy. Who's obsessed with her, and so it leads back to the parents, or rather the father, which sort of like explains all of the spoiling tactics by their lawyer. So they have a suspicion as to what's going on. And like I said, it's more about how it feeds on the next episode. Or when they eventually try to nab him in this psychological confrontation.
Well, one thing I can say for sure that I think makes this case better than the first crossover is we have a better defense attorney.
That's hopefully not that's a low bar, Jeff, but good.
Well, I'm just saying that was one of the weak points we mentioned in the first story, is that the defense attorney was not very good, and in this one we have a better one, so it's that part is a step up.
Yeah, that was almost comedically bad. That one. The previous defense attorney.
Now he will show up again, which I think I told you before, but not in this. But he'll be back in the final crossover in season 7. So.
Right. Is there anything else? Right.
I was going to say about what you said about the one-liner stuff that I think I mentioned on the last, the first crossover review, that Law and Order sort of lends itself more to kind of the humor having to be one-liners because of the format of the show, the way they kind of jump from scene to scene and try to get all of the stuff of the case, both the police and the lawyers and all, and the court and everything, all in one episode for most of their regular cases.
Yeah.
That there's not a lot of time to sort of develop, the setup of humor, as you don't have as much stuff about the personal lives of the cops. You only have just sort of, they'll touch on something, it's like on the way to a scene or on the, in the office, they'll kind of throw out a few things about what's going on with their families or other stuff, but it's not as focused on
right.
Order. Everything is about the case.
I felt it was almost as if the kinds of lines from Briscoe were the right tone. It's just that I can imagine funnier lines of the same tone in that situation. So it's almost like the tone of the lines was right. It's just that they could have been better of the same tone. So the actual tone was okay.
Yeah, and of course I've been watching, that's one difference is I've been watching the Law and Order episodes, that aren't the crossover ones along with these. And so I can kind of notice when there's a little bit of a difference in that. And I think in general, they were both a little bit more subdued in this episode than they sometimes have in some episodes around this time. For whatever reason, I think they kind of, maybe they were trying to sort of portray the idea that both of the detectives, the New York detectives, were a little bit shocked by all this, that they were a little bit thrown off. Especially by the media attention, because they're not usually bombarded by the media as much.
Like here, this reaction here. You've got he's got children.
Yeah, they both have daughters, so it's like they've and Briscoes are fully grown now, but still, they're both kind of looking at it from their perspectives as fathers as well.
Yeah, to him that'll feel like only 5 weeks ago his daughters were the same age as her.
Mm-hmm.
So hardened detectives. Right. So we had a little bit of a scene between Curtis and Falzone talking about their children at the graveside when they were, pretending to be diggers.
Right.
I wonder if there could have been a. Right. Okay. I thought they might put a bit in where Falzone might want to get paid for digging that hole.
We even had what amounts to a cameo appearance from G. He had the one scene.
Well, he still get the episode fee.
He still got a joke in too, though.
Yes.
He got to mess with Munch a little bit. So.
Yeah, and also he'll get the episode fee and he'll get the residuals on the DVD set for being in this one episode. There's not much here except I took some grabs of the people who are in it, the names. I don't know if there are any particular beyond.
Yeah, as I said the last time we did a crossover, Jerry Orbach is probably best known to people of my generation and afterwards as the voice of the Candlestick from Beauty and the Beast. From the Disney animated version. I know they made a new live-action version, but from the animated one that my son used to play over and over again when he was a little kid. Benjamin Bratt, of course, went on to be in quite a few movies. Patha Murkison is actually the longest-running cast member of Law & Order. She joined in season 4 and was in it all the way to the end of the original Law & Order. So she did 16 seasons, 17 seasons, something like that.
Yeah.
And Waterston has done a lot of different stuff. I first remember seeing him in a show that my mother watched in the early 90s called I'll Fly Away, where he played the dad on that show. He played Lincoln in a TV miniseries back in the 80s.
Was it about a pilot?
Salman Rushdie's Lincoln.
Oh.
No, about Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Carrie Lowell, I don't, off the top of my head, remember anything she did other than Law & Order, but I know she did some other stuff, and she's one of those that joined the cast and then ended up coming back later as a guest star after she left the show full time. And she's that's one different. The one difference in the cast from when we did the first crossover is that the female assistant DA in the first one was Jill Hennessy, and her character actually got killed in a car accident at the end of that season. So.
Ooh.
And Stephen Hale, the the boss, the actual elected district attorney.
Yeah, you see, Jeff's pretty confident that I'm not going to watch this series, so he doesn't mind giving that spoiler away.
Well, yeah, I guess sorry for anybody who was going to watch on her, but it was a good episode and a good scene the way they did it, I think. But other than it doesn't get like more than much of a passing mention in the next, in the beginning of the next season, because it was the last episode of that season. So, it doesn't really change anything that much, other than just there being a different attorney. So, Stephen Hill, who died recently, I think last year, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think that's why I did him as the thumbnail for the crossover episode.
Actually, I had a picture of him as my Facebook profile photo for a little bit in tribute. Stephen Hill was. Now I'm gonna forget. I forget whether it's Orthodox Jew or Conservative Jew, because they have like sort of different categories of. Whatever it was, it's one that doesn't believe in working like something like sundown Friday to sundown Saturday or Saturday to Sunday. I forget which one it is. But because of that, there were certain times in the filming schedule for Law and Order where they had to adjust to that. Because
it's probably going to be...
And certain holidays.
Yeah, it's probably going to be from sundown on Friday.
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's Saturdays to...
Yeah.
Jewish Sabbath. For Jews, yeah.
We got here. The guest stars. Any of these?
Maureen Andrew, I'm guessing that's probably the mother of the victim. I don't know for sure, but Dan Hedaya has done a lot of different stuff. Probably is, to me, the best role I know him in is Nick Tortelli, Carla's ex-husband on Cheers, which he was really funny in that role. He also played a werewolf.
Is that him?
No.
Oh.
No, Dan Hedaya is the defense attorney.
Oh, right. Okay.
He played a guy who thought he was a werewolf. Anyway, on two different Stephen Bochco cop shows, because he originally had him on Hill Street Blues, and then he came back on NYPD Blue, basically playing the same character of like a homeless dude who said he needed to be locked up because he was a werewolf.
Who's Tom Tammy?
I don't know. Maybe that's the guy in the picture. I'm not sure.
And then we know who this guy is. It's
Jelko Ivanek, but of course they left out his accent marks that he has in the Homicide cast when he was in there. Yeah, that is Ed Danvers, Baltimore or Maryland State's attorney.
Dan Fraser. To counsel.
And that would be that's the psychiatrist they had at the end of the episode. And obviously, this tells you who's it's our homicide.
John Zito, we know that. And then we have a woman who's probably a T in MBTI terms.
Maybe so.
What else have we got? Random photos. We've got Megyn Kelly probably after a nose job. Recent photo interviewing Putin. Yeah, but she is so. I think she's either ENFJ or ESFJ, but she's like whenever she would do like a video with a piece with Bill O'Reilly, and he'd be like really aggressive, and he would have no effect on her, and it's like, and she's there with Modi, the PM of India, and with Putin, and it has no effect on her. And I remember when she was the first one that challenged Trump when she gave him the question in the primary and said, "Is it true that you have a problem with women?" Oh, it's even stronger than that. It was like, "It seems you have a problem with women." So, and she rattled him.
At this point, register my complete lack of interest in this topic.
Oh, moving on. And then random picture of a J20. Right. So that's
slightly more interesting, brother.
Right. And so we'll go over to So, what would I give this one? I think for about the first 2/3 of it, it was petering along at about. It was sort of like a 4, then it became a 5, and then it sort of went up to about a 6 or a 7. Maybe just on the promise of what there is to come. So I think overall I'll give it about a 6.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'd give it a 6 too, because I think there's nothing particularly bad about it for sure. You know, it's well paced. Everything's well presented. The actors are convincing. Everything kind of flows well. It's just there's nothing particularly spectacular or compelling about it, except as you mentioned as a setup to the conclusion. So it's like it's well done, but it's just sort of there. It's not like, oh, that was such a great episode or that was such a bad episode. It's just it's a well done piece of television that by itself is not spectacular in any way. So yeah, I would say 6 out of 10. So obviously an average of 6. And join us next week for the showdown. Or it's actually just called Baby It's You also. Or I guess you could call it part 2. This time they kept the same title for the homicide episode, so even though Ben doesn't like that title.
Yeah, it's just about.
But anyway, that's what we'll do next week, and there may be another twist, and you'll get to see some good interaction with Danvers and McCoy. So you get that pair.
And of course,
so
Danvers is he's single at the moment in 1997.
Yeah.
You know,
and the return of a judge that we've seen before on homicide too. So
right.
Stay tuned for all that next week.
Okay, bye, folks.
Bye-bye.